I'm excited to have you guys join. In fact, while we're talking in the chat section, let us know if you've already joined the basics call. I know this is the advanced call, so a lot of you came from that basics call. You got to learn the basics of your app, buyer, seller, and then of course we talk about how to adjust your profile information to get ready for this call, the advanced call, which we hold once a month, where I talk about, what are the newest tools that we have available in the app. As you guys know, we like to introduce new features regularly, and we've got some cool ones in the hopper that maybe I'll mention to prime you for the release of those features. But then we also talk about the monthly marketing package, which is, of course, what we do each month at the beginning of the month, where we highlight pieces of content based on the biggest talking points the biggest conversations that we see you guys having out there in the field. And so we've got some really cool content that we've highlighted for this month's marketing package. So I really look forward to showing you that. In fact, I'm going to switch it up this time. I know a lot of you guys have joined us before for our advanced classes, and I usually do the format of talking about the calculators and then switching over and talking about the monthly marketing package. Today, I'm going to switch it up and I'm going to talk about the monthly marketing package first because I want to then show you guys calculators that you can use after you get conversations started with the monthly marketing package pieces. And so definitely a cool format today for you guys. In fact, let's go ahead and dive into it. I'm going to pull up my iPad here. And, for those of you who are joining from the basics class, and maybe you don't have premium yet, a premium is an optional subscription portion of the app. That's where you'll unlock that social media content library. I'm going to go ahead and open up my PalmAgent One app. Again, I'm showing an unbranded PalmAgent version of the app, but you guys might be using branded versions of the app that you get from your favorite title sponsor. I, of course, will be using a local DFW version for demonstration purposes here with this PalmAgent app. So I'm going to open it up. And of course, we know the buyer tab is the way that we generate those estimates for the buyers when we're out there house shopping with them. And of course, the seller tab, the world's fastest net sheet, you guys. I don't say that term lightly. I actually submitted a video to the Guinness Book of World Records to claim that name for us. We like to brag that you can create and email off a great looking net sheet in under 30 seconds. And of course, if you haven't taken a look at that net sheet program yet, that seller tab, connect with your title rep or reach out to our support team, support@palmagent.com, and we'll give you some resources to help you learn how to use that fabulous tool. But again, this is the advanced call where we venture into the calculators tab, where, as you know, we have about 28 different calculators and more on the way. We've got some exciting ones that we'll be releasing here in the next couple of months. But 28 calculators to really help you look like an expert in those conversations with your clients, you guys. And then, of course, the premium tab, which, like I said, is that social media content library. This portion of the app does cost, but don't worry, it's not that much. It's 99 cents a month, or if you want to pay for the full year, it's $9.99. And, if you're nice enough, I'll fly out there to your area and I'll help you shake some couch cushions and find those 4 rusty quarters to pay for that, because you guys you're going to want to have access to this content library. I mean, being able to access thousands of pieces of content to help market our business, our real estate business, on social media and in person with these printouts, it's invaluable. Well worth those 4 rusty quarters. Thanks, George. It looks like George mentioned that he loves premium. In fact, I'm curious how many others in the call today also love premium. I like to think it's the best value in real estate. You can't even get a burger for 99 cents anymore, you guys. So being able to have access to a large content library like this is so invaluable for our business, especially when we do our monthly marketing package, which, let's dive into that. I'm going to click on this April monthly marketing package featured card. Up there at the top of your premium section, you'll see various featured cards. This is where you'll be able to see past monthly marketing packages or pieces of content that we've highlighted. I also load some tutorial videos in there for you guys sometimes. And so that's where you'll be able to find specific things that we're trying to highlight and market for you. But I'm going to open up that April monthly marketing package featured card there, and it's going to launch my pop up for the monthly marketing package. And a lot of you, maybe when you opened up your premium tab, you already saw that pop up for the monthly marketing package. But let's go through it. Let's talk about what's being highlighted in the April monthly marketing package that was released, I believe, yesterday. We released that, maybe it was the day before, but this is hot off the press content to help you in those conversations with your clients. Let's dive in. So, the first piece that we highlighted for our April monthly marketing package is this the golden window infographic, which is a tremendous tool, you guys, for helping you get that seller who maybe bowed out. Maybe they tried to sell during the winter and they had a hard time. As you guys know, a lot of our sellers had a hard time selling their homes over this past quarter. We saw days on market going up. We saw a lot of sellers offering concessions, still a valuable tactic in today's market. But we're reaching that point in the year that is famous for being great for selling your home. In fact, it's the golden window. The key months in the year to sell your home are April, May, and June. And so being able to start that conversation now with our clients, now might be a good time to sell. In a month from now, which will, it'll take us a little while to get everything set up, get the house clean, get it listed and all that. Maybe we will end up actually selling in May, which is actually the peak time. Now, I am going to open up this piece. So I'm going to go ahead and click on it, and I want to show you guys something very cool that we've done with this piece of content and the next piece of content that we've created. So as you guys know, we now have Altos data where we're pulling data about specific areas. And we've done a lot of cool things with data over the years. And, we've got all the address data to pull about a specific listing and such. But recently we got the Altos data so that we could give you insights about an area. What about this city? What about this metro area? Can I see data about the metro or the city or the zip code that this house is in? We've actually done that with this infographic. So as you can see, it's talking about that golden window, best times to sell, where you'll make more. In fact, the average is about $6,000 extra dollars typical sellers earn with this timing window. On average, about $6,000 or, 1.7% higher prices for late May listings versus the national average. Again, the best time to sell is that peak season in real estate, April, May, June. And this is a great piece that helps you talk about that. But the really cool piece about it, I want to scroll down, not only the average days on market for this specific area, but also this graph here down at the bottom, the average days on market, that is actually built in to be address or area specific, you guys. You'll notice at the top of the screen, there's an add address to see what's nearby. If you click on that and you go in and plug in an address, forgive me, I'll use a Texas address, but for those of you following along, plug in whatever address you want, plug in a city, plug in a zip. But what it's going to do is it's going to recalculate this infographic. Here, I can see what the average days on market for this specific city, but then it's also going to pull average days on market data right here, you guys. And again, this is specific to the city that I've plugged in. Grapevine, Texas is what this is pulling information on right now. Again, such a great piece here. Whether you're using the social media version like I'm looking at here, I've got a great piece for a Facebook story, but we also have different sizes of this. As you guys know, when you're looking at your library, in fact, I'll take a step back. Any of the any of the categories of content here, if you press the see all on the far right side of the screen, so I'll do it for the infographics category here. There's then going to be a tab bar at the top with different sized versions for the different platform placements. So of course, we were just looking at the Facebook story version. it's a rectangle if I'm going to do a story or a reel. Whereas if I'm going to try to do an Instagram post or a Facebook post, we need that square version or that 4:5 ratio version. So we do have different versions optimized for the various platform placements. And so I would recommend you guys using the printout version of this graphic. You could also use one of the social post sizes of this as well. But I really think that this is a great piece to use in a conversation with your seller. You know, if you've got a seller who maybe went a little stale, an expired listing, maybe they listed in November, had a hard time, or maybe even further than that in August or September, and they had a hard time selling through the fourth quarter of 2025, and you know, you want to reach out to them, get them rethinking about how now could be a good time. This is a great piece to use in that conversation, you guys. Talk about how much more they could sell their house for. You know, give them a realistic picture of what the days on market are right now, the average days on market for this area right now. When you were trying to sell in December, you know, numbers might have been a little bit longer to sell your home for the average. Now we're looking at a more, you know, a better market for you to consider selling. And of course, being able to plug in their address and have local data about their specific address. This is the type of content, you guys, in that meeting with that seller. If you're following back up with that seller and trying to get them to think about selling their home now, this is a great piece to help you in that conversation. So definitely a really cool piece that I wanted to cover with you guys. Now, the other piece, the second piece, I'll go through the second piece as well before I want to switch over to the calculators tab and show you a few calculators that'll also help you in that conversation. You know, once you've used that piece of content to really reconnect with that seller who maybe fell off and stopped thinking about selling. Oh man, we had such a hard time. I don't know if I'm ready to sell again. You know, first you use that piece to show them that now is a better time to sell. And then we'll talk about the calculators you can use when you get into that conversation. But since our second piece is also a piece that could be good for that conversation, reconnecting with that seller who, you know, paused their home sale for a little while because they weren't getting the results that they wanted. Jill is asking if this data is tied to local MLS. Absolutely. That is where Altos pulls a lot of its data. There's other, you know, sources that Altos uses, but the MLS, the local MLS, is one of the sources that Altos as a whole uses. And so absolutely that is tied to local MLS data. Love that. All right, so the second piece, you guys, that we highlighted that I want to talk about before we jump into a few of those seller calculators that I think could be extremely useful. Our second piece, too many homes for sale, what the data says. You know, again, if we're working with a seller who had a hard time selling through the winter and we're trying to recharge that conversation, get them to think about reconsidering and selling now, which is a better time to sell your home, this is a great piece to help you in that conversation. I'll go ahead and open it up and I'll show it to you. So this piece, it kind of plays off of the headlines. A lot of these headlines are saying that inventory is so high right now. It's reached historical records, you know, all this different stuff that these headlines are spouting out about where inventory is. But when you take a step back and you look at that historical view, really inventory is getting more online to the pre-COVID normal inventory levels. Of course, during COVID, we had such record low inventory that any amount of inventory after that can feel like a ton. And of course, you know, in 2025, there was a lot of inventory. But if we're looking at where levels are right now, it's more online with where inventory was before that COVID time. And so, you know, I'm going to show you that this piece is really awesome for the same reason that that other piece is. We've got local data tied to it, the graphic, these stats that are shown in the middle. You know, all of that is based on an address. And in this example, you can see it's DFW and Arlington, the Texas Metro. But once again, we'll find up at the top, add an address to pull some data about that specific address. And so I'll go ahead and plug in that Grapevine address again. And it's going to update that with information about Grapevine specifically, you guys. And so here we've got, inventory numbers, all of that good stuff, but it actually also adjusted the graph based on Grapevine, Texas. And again, this is just more material to help you look like a rock star in that conversation. If that seller is worried about inventory levels, they've heard the headlines. They think that inventory is high. Inventory is so high, I don't know if it's a good idea for me to sell right now because everybody else is selling right now. So is it the right time for me to sell? This is your way to have that conversation with them and say, hey, I know the headlines might be shouting that inventory is so great right now, but if we look at where inventory sits historically, we're really more normalized than you would think. And so this is a really great piece to also help you in that conversation with that seller to really get them thinking about how great of a time listing right now is. And so those two pieces, you guys, great for using with sellers specifically, with the goal being to reactivate them. Get them thinking about listing right now in this peak golden window. The best time for them to sell, the best time of the year for them to sell is right now. These two pieces will help you in that conversation. And so with that in mind, let's talk about, I'll jump to the calculators tab. Let's talk about two calculators, you guys, that I think that'll be extremely useful to help you get any traction if you do get that seller to actually consider listing right now by one of those pieces. You've used one of those pieces, you posted on social media, you got somebody to reach out to you. What calculators in your calculators tab should you use in that conversation with that potential seller? The first one I want to talk about with you guys is one of our legacy calculators that has always been a really powerful calculator. If you don't know about it yet, you're going to know about it today. The sell to net calculator. It's one of my favorites. It's an OG calculator of ours. The sell to net is actually a reverse calculation of our net sheet program, our net sheet calculator, which is again the fastest net sheet in the world. But the sell to net calculator actually runs that calculation backwards. So instead of plugging in a home price, running a net sheet, calculating the broker fees and the policies and all that such, and telling a seller what they'll net, you get to do that calculation backwards. You get to start with, hey, how much do you want to net? Like, I heard you saying that you're thinking about selling. What's your net goal? What's your magic number? How much do you need to make on the sale of your home to let me list this for you? And we get to plug in that net goal number, run the calculation backwards, let it calculate the broker fees and all the title policies and different things to tell us what we need to sell the house for them to reach that net goal. And so the sell to net calculator is such a tremendous tool, you guys, for a conversation with a seller. If this seller resonated with your piece, maybe you posted that golden window on social media, you've got that seller who had a hard time selling with another agent, but they see this piece, they reach out to you. I've been thinking about relisting. Could you help me? What are your thoughts? A great calculator for you to start with in that conversation is that sell to net. Because what it lets you do, you guys, is again, start with that number that seller cares about most, what they're going to walk with. What's your magic number? What's your net goal? How much do you need to make, Mr. Seller? If you were to sell your house, like what would you need to make? And we could start the conversation off that way. So let's say that seller says, hey, you know what? If I could walk with 75,000 bucks, I'd sell today. If I can walk with $75,000, I'm in. That's what I want to walk with. And we could just press compute, and of course we could plug in a loan balance. But when it comes to that loan balance, if you don't know already, I want you to know about our home link feature, you guys. Up in the top left corner, there's an add address button. And I want all of you guys using that because we've got some cool features coming to this address data that you'll see in the next few months. I'm not supposed to talk about it, but I'll mention we've got some really cool automated valuation model features loading into the app here in the next couple of months. Soon you'll be able to add an address and we'll be able to give you a high end, a low end, and a market value list price for that home. And so I want you guys using that add address as much as you can. You'll see some cool features added there here in the coming months. But for right now, the way we use it, we add the address, and again, I'll use that Texas address here in Grapevine. And what our home link feature is going to do first, it's going to pull taxes. It's going to pull a tax record for us from county records about that address specifically, and such good information when we're working up a net sheet. This is what that seller actually paid in taxes last year. So such a cool data point. But the real value in HomeLink here on a seller calculator, you guys, if you press next, it's going to search for an open loan on that property. Here I can see that a loan was originated in 2021. I can see the amount for that loan. If I plug in an interest rate, the app's actually going to show me how much they still owe on that mortgage. It's going to show me an estimated loan balance. Now, you guys know that this is your favorite app on your mobile. Most of you probably use it on your phone. And sometimes we don't know what rate that homeowner got on their mortgage. Maybe I'm at the stoplight working up this net sheet here. I don't recommend you should do that, but let's just say you were, because you can make one in 30 seconds. I know plenty of lights that take longer to turn green than that. So you're working up a net sheet and you haven't met with that seller yet, so you don't know what mortgage rate they got on that mortgage of theirs. Here, you guys, is the average rate for the year that loan was originated. So I can see in 2021, there was that glorious sub-3 rate, 2.9. So I'm going to go ahead and use that. I'll plug in a 2.9 rate. I'll hit compute. There's how much that homeowner still owes, you guys. $377,000 is what that homeowner still owes if they've been regular on their payments. It's not going to take into account if they've fallen behind or if they've paid extra, but we've run a straight amortization schedule. So if they're making regular payments and they started February 2021 with this amount, this loan amount, here's how much they would owe today based on an amortization schedule over 30 years. So cool feature when you need it. When we're out and about, if I'm at my daughter's soccer game working up this net sheet for one of the other parents and they don't know how much they still owe, I look like a rock star being able to plug in their address and have that information pulled. So okay, I'm going to go ahead and rerun that. Patty is asking, where do you have the button to see the average interest rate for the year? It's actually going to be in gray text just below the input field there. And so I'll show that again. I can't zoom into it. Chris, if you wouldn't mind, when I get that pulled up, can you highlight it? Hover over the average interest rate for that year. So right there is where you'll see the average interest rate for the year. So hopefully that helps you, Patty. Another thing that I want to point out while we're here, you guys, down at the bottom, I want to point out question or issue about this property's data. That's an important piece that we have here, you guys. If you do find any issues with the data, and I'm very proud. I have a lot of pride in the data that we actually serve in this app because we use multiple data providers. And so our coverage area is actually better than any of those data providers on their own because we use multiple data providers. But we are at the mercy of what data is available to us. So, if your address that you're typing in isn't pulling a loan balance, but that property has a loan, let us know. If this tax record isn't being updated, maybe it's pulling a tax record from 2024, let us know. We've got enough users across the nation using this app that we're actually able to put a little pressure on those data providers and get them to update their records online. We reach out to the data providers. They then reach out to the county who they force to update those county records. And so, again, the question or issue about this data, it's a blue text down there at the bottom of your HomeLink pop-up. So once it loads up, I'll show it to you again. Down there at the bottom, question or issue about this property's data. If I click on that, it's going to log that information. but it lets you add a message. You can let us know what's wrong. Oh, the loan balance doesn't look correct. Or, oh, the tax record, it's only pulling a tax record from 2024, 2023. Let us know so that we can get that addressed for you. So I wanted to point out this option here for letting us know if there's any issues with the data, but I'm going to go ahead and use that data. So I'm going to plug in that address into HomeLink. It's going to pull, of course, the taxes for me. And then when I press next, it gives me the ability to add that interest rate. I'll do that 2.9, hit compute. There's how much that homeowner still owes. And I can press use estimate to have that information loaded into my input screen here. So I've got the taxes and I've got the loan balance loaded right into my sell to net calculator here. Now, there's a lot of additional options that you can use to really dial this in, you guys. But all we had to do is plug in that our seller wants to net 75,000 bucks. And then we added the address so that we can pull their tax record, so that we can pull their loan balance information. We hit compute down there at the bottom, you guys. And just like that, I'm able to tell them how much we would need to sell the house for them to net that 75,000 bucks. Now, again, this is, I mean, it's a difficult calculation, but it's a simple one. You know, it's just running that net sheet backwards. How much do you want to make? Here's what we'd have to sell the house for you to make that much. You know, a simple conversation for you to have. But the reason this is better, in my opinion, than the normal net sheet where you start with, hey, this is what I think we list it for, here's how much you would net, is we're focusing it on the number that they really care about. And we don't know if that number's unrealistic. If they want to walk with 75,000 and we'd have to sell this house for 487, but market value for this home is only 450, this is a better way for us to go about this conversation. You know, because instead we would have had to tell them that, hey, I think that your house is worth 450, run the calculation, show them that they're only going to net 40,000 bucks. And now it becomes a conversation about how they can squeeze our commission to get up to 75 or get closer to 75. Us running this calculation backwards, now we're starting with, hey, what do you want to make? Okay, you want to make 75. That's what you want to make. Let's run the calculation. We'd have to sell this house for 487 for you to make 75,000. And you know, 487 is actually a little too high for this neighborhood. I've looked at the comps in the area. 487 is a little high. And of course, you guys, we have an editable result screen here. So you can continue that conversation and say, hey, after looking at the comps, I think maybe 465 is more realistic. It's probably on the top end of what we could sell this house for. So let me change that to 465, hit done. It's going to recalculate. And now I can show them, hey, that have you walking with about 55,000 bucks. Does that get you close enough? You know, again, we're able to frame the conversation around the comps and what a realistic price for selling this home. It's not some conversation where it's easier for them to squeeze our commission to get up. It makes it more a conversation of how much this house is actually worth, you know, after looking at the comps in the area. And so I absolutely love this calculator. If you're already a big fan of our net sheet calculator, this is a cooler way of having that conversation with the seller, because you get to start again with the one number that they care about most, how much they're going to net. And then when you get to the results, that's where you can start playing with the sales price and have that back and forth with that seller. Instead of adjusting the net, they want to net more, and then, you know, squeezing your commission is the way that they think that they can do that. I'm really curious if anybody out there has used the sell to net calculator before, or if this is the first time that you're seeing it. But I'm going to keep the show rolling while you guys respond in the comments if you have seen that sell to net calculator. Now, the other calculator that I want to talk about with you guys when it comes to having that follow-up conversation with a seller after you've used the social media content from the monthly marketing package, and now you have a conversation with your seller, you're excited to meet with them, maybe you choose to use that seller net calculator with them. The other calculator, if you've joined our recent advanced class from last month, you might have seen this already, but it's still such a valuable tool, you guys, and I'm going to have to cover it with you. In any conversation that I get with a seller right now, there's one calculator I'm turning to. It's our newest calculator. It is what was deemed the best calculator we've ever made by Tom Ferry himself. Our true value analysis calculator. It's the first one in that top left corner. You know, it is the ultimate pricing tool. You know, if I'm going into a conversation with a seller in 2026, I want to be using this true value analysis calculator because it's really going to have me or you, if you use it, looking like a pro in that pricing portion, you know, that pricing conversation. And so let's go ahead and open it up. And I'll walk you through what the idea is here for those of you who are just joining us and didn't have a chance to see this on the last marketing advanced call. So our true value analysis calculator lets you run a net sheet for that listing appointment. But what it does is it lets you run 3 net sheets at once at 3 different price points here. You know, this calculator is going to let me say, hey, I think the house is worth 5.25. You know, that's what I think we should list it at. I've looked at the comps in the area, and I'm the listing agent here, so I think your house is worth 5.25. But there's also this trick where we list the house for 4.99. And then it gets a lot of attention. You know, maybe we get a bidding war, but at very least, it'll just fly right off the market. So let me show you that 5.25 net sheet. Let me show you a 4.99 net sheet, that price it to sell it price. And then you, Mr. Seller, you want me to list it at 550. I think that's too high for this neighborhood, but let's go ahead and run all 3 scenarios anyway. And we get to run 3 net sheets at once. Then we get to talk about, hey, if we price it too high and it sits on the market, it's going to cost you holding costs as it sits. And if it sits too long, we're going to have to do a reduction. How do the holding costs and the reduction play a part in your net on all 3 of these pricing strategies? That's essentially true value analysis, guys. And so let's go ahead and run the scenario. Let's do that 5.25. That's what we think market value is for the home. And then the low end, if we price this thing at $499, $999, we can play that psychological trick. Anybody who has their Zillow top price set at $500,000 when they're home shopping, now they're going to see this home. Maybe they'll come to the open house. We can pack the open house out, you know, and maybe get a bidding war going. So let me show you 5.25. Let me show you a $499, $999, and then, you know, for the plot, let's go ahead and do that 550. Again, I think it's too high for this neighborhood, Mr. Seller, but you know, let me show you how the numbers shake out. So we've plugged in those 3 price points. Now this is a seller calculator of course. And so if we add an address in that top left corner and we use our home link feature, it's going to pull that local data for us. You know, it's going to first show us the taxes. You know, what's the tax record? I want to use that. I press next. Then it's going to do that loan balance feature. Let me plug in that interest rate of 2.9. Let me hit compute. Here's how much they still owe. If I press used estimate, it loads that into my input screen here for my true value analysis calculator. And then, of course, the last piece of this true value analysis calculator, you guys, is the holding cost aspect. You know, especially in the instances where they've already bought their new home and they still have that old home, there's a lot of things that they're paying on it that they're not thinking about that are adding up and affecting how much they're going to net. You know, on the basic calculation, we've got taxes, insurance, and interest. You know, when you make your payment, Mr. Seller, you're getting credit for the principal. That's cutting down at your loan. But the taxes, the insurance, and interest is just money that you're throwing away. But in addition to that, you're also paying HOA on that home and electricity. And since you've still got it on the market trying to sell it, you're probably paying lawn care on it. Maybe even a pool boy to get that pool looking nice so you can get top dollar because you've got an open house this weekend and you're still trying to sell that home. All these things that you're paying, that's adding up over time, and it's affecting how much you would net. You might net more if you listed the house for less and it moved quicker when we consider these costs that are growing as the house sits on the market. And so those holding costs are a big part of this calculation. Now, we are working on a feature, another teaser here, where when you add that address, some of this data will be able to auto populate for you. We can get average kilowatt for a specific area, based on the square footage of that home, which we're also able to pull. We could populate in an electricity bill there for you. So that's something really cool that we're working on for you guys that you want to watch for here in the next couple of months. But currently, you can still sit down and have that conversation with your seller and collect all these numbers, just in a conversation with them. Hey, how much are you paying in HOA over there? Okay, 350. Hey, I know you've got to keep the electricity on so that you've got the lights on for that open house that you're holding this weekend. How much is the electricity bill over there? All these things, you guys, that they're paying each month. The internet bill. You've got the security cameras over there, so you've got to have internet. How much is that internet bill? Water, all these things. We want to go in here and really paint a realistic picture for them of how much this house is costing each month that it sits on the market. And so we go in there and we load all those things in. You're still paying the lawn guys, right? How much is that? The pool boy's still coming out, right? How much is he getting paid? All those things that they're paying each month, we add those in, we hit compute, and this is what True Value Analysis does for us, you guys. It gives us our three different pricing strategies. The low end, which is going to fly off the market. Look at the months to close, 1 month to sell at that price. The 5.25 market value, it could take 2 months, still pretty fast. And then, of course, the high end at 550, Mr. Seller. If we price it that high, it could sit on the market for 6 months. In fact, that's how long it took the last house that was priced that high above the comps. That's how long it took for that house to sell. So we've got our three pricing strategies and time frames that we could adjust. But the last metric on there, above the blue line for the net at close, is the holding costs. Each of those time frames, 1 month, we're talking 3 grand. 2 months, that's 6 grand. Over 6 months, we're talking $18,000 that's burning out of that seller's net as that house sat on the market for 6 months. That's a conversation for you to have. If we price this thing as high as the last house that priced that high and it sat for 6 months, if yours sits on the market for 6 months, that's 18.6 coming out of your net. That's not good. But really, if the house does sit for 6 months, chances are we're going to do a reduction. So I can flip the toggle for reductions. It throws a reduction section on here. Now, I can adjust the reductions amount if I want, but let's have this conversation where we talk about this net after reduction. They might be better off listing it on the low end. It flies off the market, very little holding costs, 3 grand. Maybe they even get a bidding war going. But at the very least, they sell it in 1 month and they walk with 85,000. As opposed to the other side of the spectrum, we list this house at 550 where they want to list it. A little too high. It sits on the market for 6 months. That's 6 months of open houses, people kicking you out of the house on the weekend so they can tour your home and traipsing through, not taking their shoes off, all that stuff for 6 months. Then it cost you 18.6, almost $19,000 over that 6 months. So not only the headache of those 6 months, but then also there's the cost of those 6 months, about 19 grand. And then you had to do a reduction to get the sale done. And ultimately, you walked with about 61,000 bucks. We might be better off listing this on the low end and getting some serious attention, having you walk with about 85, as opposed to listing it too high, having to deal with all the headaches over 6 months, and you're ultimately end up walking with 61. This is a way for you to talk about those three different pricing strategies and talk about those things that seller isn't thinking about right now. They're not thinking about the cost of that house sitting on the market. That's not something that they're thinking about. They're not thinking right now about a reduction happening later on if the house sits on the market. That's not something they're thinking about. And to really help you in this conversation, you guys, like I said, we've got Altos data now. If you go to the market stats tab in the center, it's going to build a report about that specific address. So here I've plugged in that Grapevine, Texas address. It's got Grapevine data here for me. And I can do the city or the zip code or the metro area, the CBSA. I'll just stick with the city. This lets me have a conversation with that seller, you guys, where I'm able to say, hey, look, If we don't price this thing correctly, it could sit on the market for a while. In fact, the average in this city is about 99 days. I want to sell your house faster than that. We got to price this thing correctly. The other stat, you guys, that really jumps out for me, the percent of listings that took a price decrease, about 37%. That's a big number. That's more than 1 in 3 listings in this city had to do a price reduction. Mr. Seller, I don't want to be on the wrong side of that statistic. I don't want us to have to do a reduction later on down the road like the 1 in 3 listings had to. We got to price this thing right out the gate so that we don't have to do a reduction later on down the road. So it gives you stats about your local market that support you in this conversation. And then, of course, the report for this, I absolutely love it. If we press that share icon in the top right corner, the box with the arrow coming out of it, I'll skip send full report. That's a 1-page report. We actually include that 1-page report in our TVA report, so I'm going to go to the TVA report instead. That TVA report, it's a 5-page packet that is going to have you looking like a rock star in that conversation, that pricing conversation with your seller. It's going to have a great looking cover sheet. If I scroll down, it then goes into a graphic that talks about, that optimal sale window. If we want to get you the most, we got to price it right and sell it fast. The longer it's on the market, buyers start wondering what's wrong. They start submitting lowball offers. Here's the local and national data to support us in this conversation about how important it is to sell the house fast to get them the most. Then we go to a page where we talk about the holding cost, you guys. If that house does sit 3, 6, 9, 12 months, here's how much it's costing you. We then go into, you guys, true value analysis, the full report. This is that 1-page full report that I was mentioning earlier. It shows the 3 pricing strategies. It shows holding costs in orange, reductions in red, showing their adjusted final net at all 3 strategies here. Great report to visually let them see those 3 different pricing strategies. And then we end it, you guys, with our seller net sheet. That app, the net sheet that our app is famous for, you can still make that in this calculator. It just gives you 4 additional pages of really educational material to help you be that rock star in your conversation with your client. So again, absolutely a tremendous tool to help you in that listing appointment, that meeting with the seller, something that you can lean on in that pricing conversation. I see Ron ask about just the net sheet. That, Ron, is done in your seller tab. So down there at the bottom of your app, the seller tab, that's how you'll make that traditional net sheet. Okay. All right, so now I got to jump back to premium because I only talked about the first 2 pieces of our monthly marketing package, which again are seller focused. Of course, they're general information to show the public that you can post on social media. But if you're going to use them as reports and get that printout size, I recommend that you use these in your conversations with your sellers. But then we have 2 other pieces, you guys. And these other 2 pieces are some cool concepts that we've drafted up as well that are more geared towards buyers. Both of these pieces show that extra buying power can come from unconventional ways. As you guys know, part of the issue with these buyers who are thinking about waiting is affordability. And of course, the rates play a big part in that affordability. With higher rates, your monthly payment's higher, so it's harder to afford a home. But there's also other ways that you can boost your capital to be able to afford a home. And the 2 ways that we mention in the 2 infographics here, DoorDash, that food delivery spend, it can add up quickly. And if you were to instead use that money for a home purchase, it really adds up quickly. In fact, in this example here, dinner at your door or a door to a bigger home, we're looking at $300 as their monthly spend. And I'll go ahead and open it up and we can look at the actual graphic so I can zoom in on it. But on this one, we are talking about $300 a month in DoorDash delivery orders, which, isn't that bad. I know some of us might look back on our bank statement and we actually ordered delivery more than that. But let's just look at this example. So $300 a month, that translates to about 3,600 a year. Well, if we look at that number, that annual number, and then we think about a mortgage being 30 years, that's a lot of additional home that could equate to. In fact, in this scenario, now we're talking about 44,000 to 50,000 more in home that we could be looking at. With $300 extra a month to spend on our home, here's how much more home we could get. That could be a bigger yard, a primary suite upgrade, backyard pool, better zip code. Those things that those buyers really care about. Maybe that's what paused their home search is that they can't get in the zip code that they want to. Cutting out that delivery spend could help you there. And of course, this is one where we've got a calculation built in. So down there at the bottom, you'll see that continue button. And now you can plug in their delivery spend. So how much are you spending let's look. How much are you spending on DoorDash? And you plug it in. Maybe it's $500 a month. Plug that in, hit compute. The app's going to recalculate this entire infographic and show you what that could equate to in more home. So a really cool concept here to, again, have that conversation with that hesitant buyer about other ways that additional buying power can come, which is cutting back on some of those spends. So with that in mind, the two pieces, because I showed you the DoorDash one. The other one that we did, we looked at that Amazon spend. Your Amazon habit could buy you a much bigger home. And it does the same kind of calculation, plug in how much their monthly spend is on Amazon. We'll turn that into a yearly spend, and then of course show them how much more home that it could equate to if that spend were instead directed towards a home purchase. And so both of those are the same concept, but with different framing. Delivery spend for food versus Amazon shopping. And so two cool pieces, but now let's talk about some calculators that you can use in that conversation with them. So first I'll start with monthly affordability. This is the other reverse calculation that I really love, you guys. If you don't know about it, very cool one. Similar to how we looked at the sell to net, where you start with a net goal, tell them what we need to sell the house for. This one does that buyer calculation in reverse. Rather than starting with a home price, showing them what their monthly payment would be, let's start with a monthly payment. How much are you comfortable spending a month? What's your rent? Like, let me show you if that rent payment were a mortgage payment, how much home you could get. And so that monthly affordability calculator, you guys, it lets you start with how much they're comfortable spending monthly. Principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, all inclusive PITI payment. Because when a buyer says, I want to spend $3,200 a month, they're not saying, I want to spend $3,200 plus taxes and insurance. They're thinking of that 3,200 number as an all-encompassing number anyway, and so that's how our calculator is built. So you get to ask them, hey, how much are you comfortable spending monthly? And they say, 3,200. For anybody in California that's on the call, I apologize. I know you guys are probably pulling your hair out with that $3,200 a month monthly payment. Every time I'm on a call with you guys, you say that I should use a much higher monthly payment than that. But for the rest of the nation and for us here in Texas, I'm going to plug in that $3,200. I'm going to hit compute, and the app's going to say, hey, if you could put 10% down, that $3,200 a month is going to get you a house in that $365 price range. Now, if you could put more down, let me grab that slider, slide that over to 20%. If you could put 20% down, that $3,200 a month is actually going to get you something in that 4.8, 4.10 price range. So how much are you comfortable, putting down? This again is a way for us to just have that conversation. Maybe we posted that DoorDash piece on our social, and we've got somebody who's reached out to us. This is a great calculator to start that conversation with that home buyer. Again, use it on a renter, use it on a first time home buyer to approach that conversation a little bit more casually. How much are you guys comfortable spending monthly? This is a great calculator to help you in that conversation, you guys. Such a tremendous one. So that's one calculator I would direct you to. The other calculator I would use on that buyer who, maybe reaches out or comments on your post when you post one of those DoorDash or Amazon pieces. Buy now or buy later. This is such a tremendous tool, you guys, and still very relevant for today's market. Basically, it lets us compare buying now with a higher rate versus buying later with a lower rate. But what we tie into this calculator, and the thing that those buyers who are thinking about waiting for a lower rate forget, is that homes appreciate. So that home that you're looking at right now, it's going to be more expensive if you were to wait. And throw low rates into the mix, it's going to appreciate even faster. We've seen what happens when low rates enter the market. That's when all the other buyers want to enter the market too. And now you guys are all fighting over homes, shooting those home prices up even further. And so if we're going to compare buying today versus buying, let's say next year with a lower rate, we got to think about buying at today's price versus next year's price. And of course, if there is lower rates next year, if there are lower rates next year, I'd rather get the home for the right price today and refinance down to the lower rate. That's the kicker of it. That's what this buy now or buy later calculator lets you have that conversation about. So I'm going to go ahead and open it and run it as quickly as I can. I know we're coming up on the end of this call, but I'll plug in that home price. And with this calculator, you guys, again, you could use it when you get that follow-up with that buyer who reached out to you. But really, I like to use this calculator when I've already toured a home with a buyer, because I want them to have a home price and an actual tangible home tied together in their mind. Because later when we start talking about that home costing more in the future, I want them to feel that. And so if I've actually shown them an actual home, it makes it easier to say, hey, next year it'll be this much. You were on the fence about it at that price. How do you feel about buying it at this price? We want them to actually feel the weight of how that home appreciates. And so I've toured a home with a buyer. I'll plug in that 5.25 price point with them, and I'll hit compute. And the app's the calculator's first gonna give me a buy now scenario. Here's your monthly payment. Here's your bring to close if you're buy at today's price and today's rate. So simple, standard, cut and dry. Now, for those of you who don't know, that blue bar at the top of the screen, that shows additional screens that you can swipe to. If I swipe over once, the appreciation tab is the first tab in this calculator, you guys, and it's going to give us an actual number of how much that home could cost in the future. That 5.25 home that we toured with that buyer, if they were to wait 2 years with a conservative appreciation rate of 3.5%, that home would be 562. And what you can do with this, if you can scroll down and see what the actual expert predictions are for the next 12 months for appreciation. So maybe they say, you know what, NAR says it's 2.5%. So let's drop that. We can grab that slider, drop that down to 2.5%. And you know what? This buyer specifically, they're not waiting 2 years. They're just thinking about re-signing their lease and waiting just 1 year. So let's change that to just 1 year. Even at a more conservative appreciation rate, 2.5%, which I think they're going to appreciate more than that. And over 1 year, that house that we just looked at this morning, it could cost you about $540 if you were to re-sign your lease and wait and buy that exact same house next year. You're on the fence about it at 5.25. How do you feel about buying it at $540? Do you feel better about buying it at $540? We all know that homes typically appreciate, that they generally appreciate. This is a way for you to actually have a conversation with that hesitant home buyer and give them a realistic look at how much that house could cost. Give them an actual number. Sometimes we just need to see what that actual number is. This gives you the ability to do that. So that's the first piece of your buy now or buy later, is talking about appreciation. Now I'm going to switch it back to 3.5% and 2 years, and I'll go to the next tab of this calculator, which really is where the meat is, the refi tab. The way we see it, if you, Mr. Hesitant Buyer, think that there's going to be lower rates in 2 years or next year, whatever the scenario is that we're running, you've got two options. Option A, you buy the house today. You get it for the right price. And then when those lower rates come, you refinance down to the lower rate. That's option A on the left side. The right side has you wait. You don't buy the house now. You buy a house in 2 years, but home's appreciated, so you had to pay more for the home at that point. But good for you. You got that low rate. Here's what the monthly payment difference would be on those two different tactics. Obviously, they're getting the better monthly payment by buying the home for the right price and then refinancing down to the lower rate, as opposed to waiting, paying more for the home and getting that low rate where their monthly payment is 4,600 as opposed to that 4,100. But really, what we want to talk about with them is their equity stance in the future. If we're to look at where you were in April of 2028, let's scroll down. If you went down option A, you've got about 100,000 in equity that you've built over those 2 years. You've put the money down, you've paid towards principal over 2 years. The house appreciated in your favor. You're sitting on 100,000 in equity. As opposed to you waiting, you buying the house in 2 years where you haven't paid towards principal. You didn't get any appreciation. In fact, the appreciation worked against you and made you pay more for the home and put more down. But really, ultimately, in April of 2028, you've only got 50,000 in equity. Where do you want to be in 2 years? So this is such a tremendous calculator for you to use to talk about buying now versus buying later with that hesitant buyer who's specifically wanting to wait for a lower rate. Is the lower rate worth it, or should we get the home right now for the right price and then address the rate later with a refinance? So such a cool calculator here. Now, I know we've got 3 minutes left, and so I'm going to go ahead and look at these questions. But while I do that, I want to invite you guys to do a few things. First, go and rate your app. In the App Store, you can just search for your app and go in there, give it a rating, give us a comment if you'd like. We really would love to see your thoughts on the app. We work hard to make sure this is something that you can use daily. Of course, again, rate the app and let us know and let your fellow realtors know that this is a tool that can help them in their business. So that's one thing I wanted to mention. Another thing I like to say is follow us on Facebook and Instagram. If you're not already, we've got some really cool things that we post on there, some strategy PDFs. We do our monthly marketing package video where I detail out what we're highlighting and how to use it. And so I definitely encourage you guys to join us on the PalmAgent community. You can just search PalmAgent on Facebook or on Instagram. Okay, and while you guys are doing that, hopefully some of you guys are doing that right now, let's look at these questions. So Lori, she asked what goes into closing costs. The best way to see that is to go, I'm on my buyer screen here. If I go into the options in the top right, closing costs is right there, and you can see what closing costs your title partner has loaded into your app. So hopefully that helps you, Lori, with determining what closing costs are built into your brand of the app. All right, so we've got an anonymous attendee. Can you focus on a specific subdivision? Okay, so with us working on additional data from Altos, I believe city is the smallest, category that we have, but I have seen subdivisions and other data sets, so that's something that we will be working for, more of a neighborhood view to go lower than that city view. So thank you for mentioning that. All right, so let's see, Leslie over here in the comments. How does HomeLink reflect the balance on a reverse mortgage? Okay, I don't believe that we do have reverse mortgages specifically built in, Lori. However, one thing that I do want to point out to you, which could be helpful, one, if you add an address, they will have, if they have multiple loans, a secondary loan, a tertiary loan, those will also show in there. But manually, one cool thing I want you to know, if you go to the loan type on our seller tab, so we're running a seller net sheet or any of the other seller calculators, when you change that loan type to conventional second, that's where you can go in and manually put in additional loans that seller may have. So that could be a useful thing for you specifically, Leslie. Um, Okay, Tony Scardina. Tony, happy to see you join this. Long time, man. All right, so if we go to the calculators tab, Tony's asking, for somebody who just wants to get just the title fees. If you're a lender on the call and you're curious, you probably will play with some of these calculators as well, but maybe you just want your title partner's fees. There is a title and escrow closing fees calculator. You'll find it in the middle right there of your calculators tab. If you click on that, that is where you can go in and choose buyer with financing, buyer all cash, seller refi, plug in a home price and a percent down, and it'll tell you just the title and escrow fees. Um, Okay. Gregory brings up an interesting conversation. So that almost seems like a short sale conversation. I would recommend using that sell to net calculator that we were talking about before, and you can just plug in a zero net there because that'll at least give him an idea of what it would be to break even. The net sheet itself will actually show a negative number, though. So you could run a net sheet and it'll show a negative number if that's applicable. Any new? Yeah, good to see you too, Tony. Awesome. All right. Any other questions that you guys have? All right. Well, again, thank you guys for joining us for the April advance call. It's truly a pleasure. We look forward to seeing you on next month's call as well. We've got some really cool things that we'll be releasing. I teased it on today's call a little bit with you guys, that AVM feature that you'll see throughout the app. Definitely some cool stuff. I encourage you, again, to follow us on Facebook and Instagram. And of course, go rate your app, you guys. We'd love to hear your feedback on what you think of the app, and that does help us, show how powerful of a tool this can be for an agent's real estate business. And so we encourage you guys to rate the app on your app store. But thank you guys for joining, and hope you have a wonderful April.